Good morning, everybody. We're so happy that you're here and logged on, and you could be anywhere, but you're here with us, learning about some different strategies on moving DEI. So to kick us off, I do want to recognize some monthly recognitions and cultural awarenesses, starting with Happy Pride Month. I want to say Happy Men's Health Month, Happy Juneteenth, Happy Caribbean Heritage Month, Happy Loving Day, Happy Flag Day, Happy Summer Solstice, and this weekend, Happy Father's Day. Shout out to all the fathers that may be in the audience today. Okay, so our title is Moving Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion with New Rules. We're going to be talking about how DEI initiatives get stifled, the past, present, and future climate of diversity, equity, and inclusion, common approaches that have been taken since 2019, ongoing strategies that will help propel diversity, equity, and inclusion in your workplaces, despite the political landscape and climate. We will hear from our guests, speakers who are viewed as leaders in their areas of work. And we have 3 of them today, and I'm excited for you guys to hear from them. So here you see, this is pretty self-explanatory, my growth maintenance. These are just my ask as any space that we hold together is to cultivate a space of growth. So I'll go over these very quickly. First, release out ego, pride, arrogance, and judgment. Take in vulnerability, grace, humility, and justice. Avoid harmful words, tones, and gestures. Overly communicate interpretations and perspectives. That's how we learn from each other. Collaborate and express appreciation. And don't overthink it. Just have fun. We're here to learn and learn from each other. I do want you to take a look at the picture here. Take note of the journey that you're in. And this picture, even though it's here as a graphic, it means a lot as we go through this training together. So why are we here? For centuries, diversity, equity, and inclusion, also known as DEI, civil rights, and human rights have been a critical topic in moving our society forward in its journey to liberty and justice for all, right? In early 2019, the outcry of excessive police force reached all media outlets, forging a new depiction of civil rights landscape called DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. The world was outraged and organizations could no longer be bystanders. So since we have seen companies take on DEI initiatives as a call to action to political action plans and much, much more. However, our recent climate today has shifted the landscape once again. With the term DEI, also diversity, equity, inclusion, referred to as a buzzword or code for weaponizing instead of healing, instead of a collection of making sure all are celebrated, supported, and included. The truth of these intolerances have been thrown into the discard pile of truths. We are in a climate where we're like, oh, this isn't the truth that I want to hear, or if this is not a truth that is, that aligns with my algorithm, we're discarding those. So that's what I meant by discard pile of truths. And it has caused a significant slowdown in our nation's progress, if not has turned the progress back. So today, Sky Infinity would like to hold space to grasp on an understanding of the concept of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how our cultures within our workplaces impacts that progression. So some common confusion or narratives that have been made around diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives are rooted in the concept of an individual versus structural perception of DEI. So diversity, equity, and inclusion in an individual standpoint is seeing oneself as an individual outside of the social group, exempt from and unique from the culture and climate of our society. Structural diversity, equity, and inclusion are the rules, laws, policies that allow continued oppression, exclusion, and unfair elevation of some and not all. So support of things that have caused harm and putting a cap on things that help us heal. So these have been the confusing narratives that has been going around diversity, equity, and inclusion. DEI is not a personal ideology. It is a collective set of values, objectives, and to dismantle ongoing discrimination in our economic, social, educational, healthcare, criminal justice institutions, weddings, birthdays, baby showers, and much, much more. If there's people, there's diversity, equity, inclusion to be talked about. What hinders this structural concept is our individual ideology that this collective action is unnecessary and that hundreds of years of structural racism have suddenly disappeared, excuse me, and there aren't any lingering effects from it. And this probably is is also due to personally, I haven't seen it, I haven't experienced it, it's no longer here. So I want to invite our first guest speaker, Ms. Bettina, affectionately also known as Tina Tucker-Layson. She is Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Manager of Lucas County, relentlessly dedicated to providing solutions to health inequities by addressing and breaking barriers to positive and sustainable outcomes. So Ms. Tina, I would love for you to share some insights on your work and championing the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And please share some tips on how we could continue to move things along as the landscape changes.
All right. Good morning, everyone. And thank you, Jandina, for that kind introduction. I am the DEI and Health Equity Manager for the Mental Health and Recovery Services Board. And with that being said, a little disclaimer, I am speaking today not as a representative of the board, but these are my own viewpoints and opinions. Hello to the listening audience. I hope that you gained something today. I am very passionate about the work that I do for the board, and it is a top priority for us to provide health equity for all persons in the community and marginalized groups. We have a special emphasis on. That is not to say that everyone is not important, but there is always historical facts that lead to certain groups having a lower percentage or different outcomes that are not necessarily positive in the health community. Also, I am the DE officer for this office as well. I would like to share that, I came to do this work very passionately about it after the George Floyd incident. That is not the first time DEI was introduced, but at that time, a lot of major companies and organizations jumped on board to work in solidarity with the cause. They saw the need. And I believe that that urgency is still here today. What I'm seeing is a shift from that initial impact during the time around George Floyd's incident of what we are trying to accomplish. I see the definition, especially the name DEI, being misconstrued and looked at as though it is a threat, and trying to present it in a racial capacity. And it's more than that. Diversity basically is stating that we want to be mindful of the marginalized communities who have history of being discriminated against. And so I understand that at this point, there's a lot of talk of equity needing to be placed first. And I understand that equity draws us all in, and it did so in the position it had in that title, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I also understand that equity and inclusion will also bring in diversity. But what I want to express today is that there are known discriminations. There is a history of discrimination amongst marginalized communities. And for us to not necessarily say that you ignore it, but there's always something about bringing things that need to have light shined on them when they're brought to the forefront. There's a problem with the name. And so I think that people should use their own definitions. They should be clear on why they choose the name they do. And I don't think that that should be the major issue at this point. Just like anything else, people are saying that they're getting tired of hearing diversity and people cringe and people want to change your title, but I think that it is a work that has to be done. The problems that I see facing DEI is the fact that people haven't always used quantifiable measures to show that they are meeting targets and goals within a company. And I agree with that, but there are solutions for that. You know, we need to step back, reassess what the goals are, what the target is, use pre and post tests, use surveys, any points of measurement to show whether there have been successes and failures. And then you can use both as a platform to even create new initiatives to reach your goals. Another issue I'm seeing at this point is communication. Um, you need to make sure, or the leaders, whatever their goals are, everyone needs to know that across the board, all levels of management down to employees. So messages, presentations, webinars, anywhere someone is speaking about a particular company, the message needs to be the same. And it needs to also encompass what the customer wants, what the employee wants. Another issue that I'm seeing is commitment. At first, everybody was on board. We saw tons of commercials after the George Floyd incident. We saw every level of management in businesses, in organizations, in your own hometowns, everyone rallied for support. Well, now people are tending to back off. And I believe that if you are in that DEI realm, you need to stay focused. The work is far from done. And so leadership needs to show their commitment, because I believe this is a top-down effort. When leadership steps out and takes a stand, then everyone else should fall into line under that leadership. I believe that diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and accessibility is absolutely needed across the realm in order for us to bring a flourishing environment to the workplace. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Tina. I couldn't agree more, and I think that those tips that you gave are right on track, and it will help with really taking a look at our organizations, our services, and just a real good point of reflection, which is this is how we change. We reflect on what we've been doing and how we can change.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And I believe that coaching and mentorship is going to be key. You know, when you're doing this work, sometimes it can feel lonely. You need more players. You need to train other levels of management to step on board so that we all can show accountability for this work.
Absolutely. We can't do it without a community. We can't do it. Okay, so diversity is the act of celebrating all. Inclusion is the act of making all feel welcomed and included. And equity is the act of adequately supporting all. Now, take note of the way that I defined all of those. I went from diversity, inclusion to equity. If we aren't able to really celebrate our differences, how will we include each other? And if we don't include each other, how will you know how to adequately support me? So always, always, always take into a step that is a step of let's look at, are we celebrating everybody everywhere, including them everywhere? And then they have space to speak and talk about how they need support. And it matters because if the world has always historically celebrated, included you, it came with a significant privilege of support, right? And my module will always say that to those much is given, much will be required. Today in our organizational settings, um, diversity, equity, inclusion is expressed on company websites, employee resource groups, orientation, company ethics, and professional development. Some of the things that Ms. Tina have already said. Some companies have genuinely embraced this moral value of diversity, equity, and inclusion and have seen profitable results in their organizations. Yet many companies are asking, how can this be? I'm committed to DEI too, and I'm not seeing my company recruit or even retain staff. So my question to you would be, was your culture ready for it? Have you discussed your why behind it? And are you performing or transforming? Some examples of how companies have committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion and its strategies have left them stuck. So let's start off first with DEI imagery. Some companies have posted their commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, but leaders have tend to be hiding their supportive position. Leaders are not loud and proud, and this leaves room for people to misinterpret the work and not take it seriously. The 1-2 check. Always check in the box of having 1 to 2 BIPOC people at the table. BIPOC meaning Black, Indigenous, people of color at the table. This is tokenism in best practice. But not taking time for authentic relationships reduces that insight and that you have in their background and their perspectives. So this will not be sustainable.
Mhm.
The chief diversity officers. These have been positions that have opened and been filled across organizations. And they did not fully equip this role for such a large task. The action of gaslighting, feeding off the ideas and the energy of persons who are passionate and encouraging them to lead, but not because you see it as such a lift, only contributes to burnout and resentment. Also, did you know that in many organizations, I have looked at the pay scales, they pay them significantly less than other directors and managers in the organization. So this is exactly the stifling approaches that we're seeing.
Mhm.
And then self-proclaimed allyship, saying I'm an ally in the streets and you know the rest. Self-proclaimed allyship is kind of like you just saying out here that I'm the greatest. I'm the greatest of all time. I'm the GOAT. Um, walk your talk. And in my eyes, ally still separates you from the issue. We are all people, and what is hurting one will eventually hurt other. Injustice for one will be injustice for all. So we are in this together. Walk your talk.
Mhm.
This isn't. I do want to also plug in this allyship. I have seen that it's on people's profiles as like a role or a skill set. Um, but we have to we want to know that, where is the work? Have you posted it? Are you in the rooms? Are you saying the languages? So next, I would love to invite Sylvega Jacunas, whose name means sun and path, which is ironically what she does, is lights the path for others. She is an HR consultant and a career coach for her own consulting agency called Sylvega Consulting. Her passion is fulfilling passion and purpose by helping immigrants thrive professionally in the United States while also building inclusive workplaces. So, Sylvega, please share some of your insights of your journey with diversity, equity, and inclusion values, and leave us with some tips and advice that you would suggest to help others move diversity, equity, inclusion as well.
Yeah, for sure. Hello, everyone. Actually, my name is Miss Bell here, but it's okay. Yeah, my what everything you told truly resonates to me because I in the United States, a lot of people start looking at everything very on political spectrum. Like even mask became political, COVID and diversity as well. And I see that it's a human issue, and we never should look from a political perspective. And for me, I want to make other people journey easier than mine, and that's why I'm passionate about diversity. And I feel those conversations should never stop because yes, I think anybody could tell that there is a lot of work needs to be done everywhere, and the work is important and needed. And yet, I also can say that sometimes speaking is can be challenging and difficult. For me, even a year ago, I never considered myself even public speaking opportunities or being on a podcast or webinars like this because I felt very imperfect when I was speaking. I remember the first time when I listened my own podcast, I came out of the room and I told my family I cannot share that with anybody because I was starting my own consultancy, and suddenly I wanted to project a confidence for other immigrants, and I didn't look confident myself. I stumbled over the words, and I thought if I will share that podcast with others, I'm going to damage my career and nobody will ever hire me. What I didn't expect is that when I shared it, that so many other immigrants wrote back to me and asked me to be a voice for them. They told me that the conversations do not happen in the organizations. We don't have trainers or consultants who sound like them. And they told me that they will never be able to share and talk about stereotypes as openly as I did it. And for me, it was surprising because this is not how I saw myself. And I remember very well that the conversation I had with my mentor. I told him, how can I be a voice for others when I don't even like my own recordings? He told me a very powerful story that really inspired what I'm doing now. He told me, Solveiga, the time Alvin Ali created his dance company, he did it because nobody else did it. And think about all the students who never danced and all the performances that never had happened. And think about all the people who rely on your message today. And at that time, I thought, and then he told me, if you are not going to lead this conversation, who will? And I thought that the people who reaching out to me, for some of them, I was the only HR professional who knew. Some of them had even less comfort speaking up, and for some of them, English was even worse. I realized that yes, I need to speak for them because they have less comfort or they feel exactly the same way as I do, that somebody else's voice is better, somebody else is a better speaker. And this is when I start sharing about immigrant experiences and doing my own videos that I never considered before. And I can tell that the journey was not easy, it was difficult. I get a lot of different type of comments, but it was worth it because when I see that my message can help somebody else, I know it's important and needed. And recently, I never thought, but I was speaking in a global HR conference, and I'm happy to see that other leaders globally recognize that this topic is really important for a lot of organizations and that this topic should happen. And many people sometimes assume that when you speak about immigrants, only immigrants benefit from that conversation. And that actually is not true. I get feedback from everybody in the room that this conversation is important for everybody because I talk about what it's like to face stereotypes. And people say I face different stereotypes, and yet it's still stereotypes. Or I felt I don't belong in my own country. I felt like being an immigrant in my own country. Or they say I have a disability and you don't, but your language felt like disability. So please understand this topic is really important for all other people. I wanted to say that what I've learned, through this journey, that being silent is not the best option, and you don't need to be perfect to make a difference. All you want to start to do the conversation that you think that maybe it can help at least one person, and frequently it helps many more. And today, the probably advice I would like to leave that I hope we continue conversations, and then be bold, be brave, and be you. Don't be afraid. What other people perceive. Think what the message that maybe message might be needed for somebody else who feels imperfect today. That's it.
Mhm.
Thank you so much, Solvega. I adjusted your name, and I'm so sorry. Names are important. Names are who we
Okay.
are. No, it's okay. Yeah, thank you for showing me grace. I love what you said at the beginning. I mean, I love the whole thing, but when you laid the foundation of what you were saying, is that this is not a political thing. This is a human thing. This is a human thing,
Mhm.
and it benefits all.
Yes.
So we may be looking at, like I said, when injustice for one will be an injustice for all. If one person allows it and condones injustice and discrimination and harm, it'll be a matter of time before it happens to you. So thank you again, Solvega.
For sure. And thank you for inviting. It was a pleasure. Yeah.
Of course, of course. So what is our ETA, or estimated time of arrival? Many people have felt like we have arrived. We did the work, and now now DEI is like done, or diversity, equity, inclusion is no more. And the fact is that there is no point of arrival, and it's much, much deeper than what we see on the surface. It is what was being said. What are words coming out of our mouth? What's being done? What are our actions? Where do our feet move? Where are we placed? Look around you. How does it feel? And what are the thoughts that are around that are surrounding you as it's being confronted or not confronted? It includes a lot of introspection, mindset changing, relearning, humility, and courage. And as we know, as we grow, this is something that does not just stop. It stops once you stop breathing, I bet. But as long as you're breathing, it is going to be a continuous reflection, as we all know, in this thing called life. So this would not be a Sky Infinity training if we did not provide a time for pause. Pause to take into account, what are those vibrations that we're feeling? And those vibrations are rooted in our cultural norms. It is rooting in, okay, this is because our cultural norms are what we make sense of. These are how we make sense of things, how we know how to do things. So let's take into account. Now also open this up for any Q&A. Amber, you can let me know if there's any in the chat of what are we feeling right now. And while we're thinking about that, I do want us to reflect on, what are some things that you've heard around you, maybe in the workplace or any settings that you've had? Have you heard that, we don't feel safe enough to talk? We don't feel safe enough to make mistakes. We don't feel like we can ask questions. Have you seen leadership that could be more transparent, that could be more vulnerable? Or even have you said something to yourself saying, I just don't have the time. I talk to so many people. I don't talk to people because this is my form of self-care. Just let's think about the vibrations and things that we need to face, that could be getting in our way as we continue to move forward. And Amber, I don't have my chat open, so if there's nothing, can you just let me know?
There's no questions at this time.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, so we're gonna keep moving. as we're going through and we're reflecting. I'm gonna keep moving. So these are the new rules. I say that because I didn't get this out of my head. This is something that we always preach. And I think that some of us as parents, if we are parents, we've also taught to our children, and we want our children to also experience that in the spaces that they hold. So it makes sense that organizations have approached diversity, equity, inclusion the way they have, which is a awesome start, which is a great start, actually. Um, let's keep in mind that we are pre-exposed to calculations, planning, and control, and prefer things that are secure and predictable. We will do the same thing over and over, even if it doesn't work, because we're that intolerant to things that are different and doing things different. But I'm sure this group is exempt because this group is here today. And I want to believe that there's light in everyone. So I want to share with you these new rules and approaches that will help with continuing the work and will not stifle no matter what. So being humble, we'll start with humble and humility and reflection. Being humble and reflective is not saying, hey, go and make a fool of yourself, but it is the opposite of arrogance. It is knowing that there's always more to learn. And even when your way may have worked, we're not looking at, aha, my way was more superior than yours. I told you so. Next, let's talk about acknowledgement and accountability. Acknowledging others and holding yourself accountable. I know we judge ourselves. I know I do. Sometimes we can be our own biggest critic. But nobody wants to be a judge of themselves in front of, especially to someone else. Um, but what is the better evil? You taking accountability and you doing it, saying, "Hey, I messed up," or somebody having to tell you that you did. Which evil would you want? And honestly, just acknowledging and taking accountability, it can make all the difference. It can make all the difference, just acknowledging someone. Next, being vulnerable and courageous. Not saying that you have to get all cryy and tell people about your darkest traumas. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that it's a point of understanding that there's going to be a lack of certainty. There's going to be some times where you can't control, you're not understand what it is, but you accept that discomfort and you move forward anyway because it is the right thing. Enrichment and empowerment. Enriching and empowering others. And sometimes this gets a little confusing. We want to make sure that we are not giving anybody power, okay? People have power within them. But we can fan those flames and bring the resources to keep those flames going. That is how we all win. Let's not assume that people don't have it within them because we haven't seen it. We just have to give them the resources and empowerment and enrichment to fan that flame.
Yes.
So I like to think that these approaches are very simple. They're very simple. We are simplistic here at Sky Infinity, but we didn't say that they would be easy or that they wouldn't be hard. There are going to be some hard times. There's going to be some highs. There's going to be some lows, but everything we do comes with a hard. So wrong comes with hard. Right comes with hard. So decide which hard is it that you want to live with. So before we get into our last speaker, I do want to open up, and Amber, please put it in the chat, the link to the feedback. A gift from you all to us would be some feedback, and I like to say feedback with feet. That means if you critique, please make a suggestion. This will help us add more purpose and impact to others. And I do want to give the disclaimer that these responses are not interactive. Usually a Mentimeter would be an interactive poll, but these are not interactive. They just come straight to me. So let's give everybody a couple minutes to do that and provide feedback. I appreciate you guys and thank you in advance for that. All right, I'm moving on. Did anybody have any complications with getting into the survey? Amber, is there any technical issues?
I don't see any technical issues, but there is a question about if the presentation is going to be shared with the attendees today.
I am planning on giving Amber from Society for Diversity, the slide deck. All right, so if there are no technical issues with accessing the survey, we will move on. Okay, but last but certainly not least, I would like to introduce Denitra Sparrow, who is the Chief Executive Officer and Principal Consultant at Culture Refinery. She works to unleash the collective genius of marginalized talent through culture design and transformation to live in alignment with their true purpose. Denitris, can you please share your insights on work culture impact and the progress on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and help us with any takeaways, share any takeaways that will help us with moving diversity, equity, inclusion values?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. Excited to be here and excited to just share this space with the other presenters today. As Jadina said, I'm Denitra Sparrow. Most folks call me Denny, and I run a culture organization that's all about tapping into the fullness of who you are, stripping down the mask, and really unleashing our brilliance and our genius as we work together to create the world that we all want. And so when it comes to how culture impacts, right, your DEI initiatives, I have a couple of thoughts, right? The first is that it all starts with culture, right? Culture is the lifeblood of your organization. If your organization was a plane and you were in the air on a international flight, right? Your culture is what is either going to be your headwind or your tailwind. The value and the strength of your culture is what's going to speed you along that journey, or it's going as tailwinds, or it's going to be the headwinds that you are facing and having to sort of fight your way through. It's going to slow you down. And so when you don't start these DEI initiatives with a lens towards the culture, is your organization ready? What Jadina asked earlier, right? Is your culture ready for the type of work that you're looking to do? If you don't ask that question up front and answer it truly and intentionally, then you're setting yourself up for failure or, right, some initiatives that fall flat, right, that just run a little bit short. And so with that in mind, I have a couple of thoughts around how you, one, analyze, assess whether or not your culture is ready for the work, and then some of the things that I've noticed as gaps and what you can do to address those gaps. And so we have at Culture Refinery, we use what we call our culture ad framework, right? That's how we approach almost everything. And it's a super simple framework that just says, before we start anything, we want to assess, we want to understand the baseline, then we want to intentionally design how we're going to solve for that, and then we're going to be really intentional about how we deliver that. So assess, design, and deliver. And as we think about DEI initiatives and how that relates to your overarching organizational culture, is when you're doing that assessment, a lot of times we fail or drop the ball because we don't assess deep enough. For an example, we might say, you know, we really need to increase the diversity within our organization. We don't have enough people of this, you know, type of representation. And so you've now identified a lack of diversity as the root cause. And so you start running with that. And so how do you solve if you don't have representation? Oh, you go out and hire, right? So now your solution is diversity recruiting. And what I want to encourage folks to do is take a step back and be really more deliberate and intentional and get to the root cause of some of this work. And so before you go to recruit diverse talent, you've got to earn that right. You need to see, is my organization ready to support that diverse talent that I'm trying to bring in? And so there's content, there's training, there's development, there's workshop, there's policies or procedures, all sorts of things that need to be in place before you recruit your first anything, right? And that example can be leveraged really broadly across a lot of things that I see happening. And so I also want to say, right, when it comes to this work, the other thing is it's important to think about, as Jadena said in the beginning, what's your why? What is your why for doing this work? And I want to challenge you on this why, and I want to encourage you to challenge your organization on the why, because sometimes the why is compliance. And the folks whose why is compliance, they're going straight to the check the box, right? They're going straight to the deliver aspect of our culture ad framework, right? We want to make sure we have, you know, 2 people at the table. What we got some ERGs in place. We doing what we're supposed to do, right? So if it's compliance, okay. The other thing that more people are leaning towards, right, is compassion. My why is compassion, because I believe in a world that everyone should be included and valued in all the things. And I say that in jest a little bit because I certainly believe that. But compassion is not enough for you to make solid business decisions. And so compassion doesn't always move the needle and doesn't always bring in the commitment that you need. And so the last why that I see is commitment and conviction. Right? Are you convicted and are you committed to do the things necessary to bring about the changes that you are now committed to do, that you're now saying are important? And depending on your why, what your why is rooted in, is going to, one, highlight how you need to move forward, but also highlight those blind spots where you're going to trip yourself up, right? So that you can be more mindful of those. The other thing that I like to say is that you've got to put some respect on it. So as I talk through these points, and I'll pop them in the chat too, put some respect on it, as Baby would say. You'll see that I have a lot of music references here. A lot of times when we think about this DEI work, we want to embed it into HR. We want to check the box. And we don't treat it with the respect that it needs. So this, if you've ever been through like a large IT transformation before, like a huge change transformation in an organization, and it's been successful, think about the rigor of that approach. In the very beginning of it, you've got leadership behind the scenes before you even knew about it. They've been talking about it for a year. They've been prepping and planning and reviewing and getting themselves ready. Right? They have the story, they've written FAQs, all sorts of things. And then they communicate it to the organization. It's a slow build, a trickle communication. We're getting additional buy-in. People are understanding why we're making this shift. We're doing training. We're doing training about the work that needs to happen before you actually start leveraging the new tool, right? And so we're doing all of those things. And yet when it comes to DEI, we just move so fast that we don't think about it in the manner that it deserves. So we're not respecting the type of transformation that we're asking for. This is a huge transformation project, and it needs to have that type of leadership. And that also takes into consideration where that leadership sits and how that leadership moves, right? When it's embedded just in HR, it can be stifled, right? And it can also lead to a lot of that compliance lens as opposed to that commitment and conviction lens. And then I want to say, you know, I like to have this analogy of a tree, right? From the root to the fruit. So when you think about an organization, the culture of your organization, the mission, your values, right? The vision that you have of that organization, that's the foundation. That's like the seeds that are planted. And then the roots are your senior leadership, right? Your senior leadership are the roots of that organization, and they are responsible for standing up policies, processes, procedures that support the mission, vision, value of the organization. And so those policies and procedures, those become the trunk. And then your middle managers, they are an extension of those. They implement those because the magic is in the middle. If you think that although this work is top down, if you think you can get anything done without getting that the biggest section of your organization on board, you are sadly mistaken. That's where everything either thrives or withers. So those branches are your middle managers, right? And they have to be bought in. They have to walk it like they talk it, the same way as the senior leaders do. And then from those branches, you have your talent, the leaves, right? The leaves out doing the work. And your tree has to bear fruit. And so the whole point of this is to bear fruit. And what's fruit? The fruit is the impact that you have on the world, the impact that you're able to have on your customers, right? All of those things. And your tree is influenced by the outside environment. So the weather, your soil conditions, rain, all of those things influence, and you have to be able to adjust, right, into those things. And so if you're thinking about your culture in this tree analogy, you've got to assess all of that, figure out where the true root cause is, and start to address those things, right? You can't just go clipping off leaves when it's really your soil that's the problem, right? And so thinking about that. And so the other thing that I'll say, and I'll wrap up, is don't skip the warm-up, right? Don't skip the warm-up. We want to go straight. Let's do some bias training. Okay, great. You probably need that. You need that often, right? Repeated. But maybe you also need to take your leaders through what we call sort of inclusive leadership competencies. Maybe they need to build their emotional intelligence. Maybe we need to understand how to manage conflicts better. Maybe we need to understand how to build relationships and build trust in organizations and cultivate psychological safety. And those things are not DEI exclusive. That's just how you lead effectively. But when you do those, it makes it easier for you to have these more difficult and challenging and polarizing conversations. So there's some pre-work that has to happen before you go off and try to do these DEI things. And that pre-work is what is saying whether or not you have a strong culture that is ready for this work. This work is ongoing, and you have to be fit. You have to be ready, conditioned for the work and for the impact. And I'll stop there because that's a lot.
But it was very fruitful. Thank you so much, Denny. I couldn't agree more. I like to say that we all are trees. We're all trees of the forest, and we ourselves need to make sure that our soil is good. So like she was saying, it was, the warm-ups, like how do you handle conflict management, and how do you reflect on when things are confronted to you, and are you taking accountability? And us together individually and then us together structurally, we all need to take that into account. And it can't even grow or bear good fruit or plant good seeds if the soil is eroded, dry, toxic. And we, as the forest, we create the environment. So just think about how you in turn will be the community that you make. So it's not only internally in our organizations, it is if we are creating a sick organization, a unwell forest out there, do you think it's going to be fruitful? How so? So to think about, the culture, it impacts us inside and outside the organization. Thank you so much, Denitris. So we are going to be wrapping up here soon. Just wanted to, share just one key to it is time. We're never going to get to where we want to go if we can't discuss today how we got to where we are, and where, and we have to have that safety net, the health of a healthy culture safety net, where we can celebrate differences, we can be inclusive, and we can take time to support one another. Like I said, it is not easy, but there's hard in different ways that you choose. So we will continue to go for the quick, or do we want to do more of the lift that will bring us sustainment and equity in our organization and in our communities? So just because it was held down for 2 to 3 years, a lot of people were showing strong commitment doesn't mean that it's finished. And it will not be necessary. It is absolutely going to be necessary as long as we have people and as long as we have people who are not clones. So cultivating spaces for growth will bring the right people to the right spaces and move us to the right places. Making a conscious effort to learn from any mistakes or anything that we could do better, and doing so better with the information that we have the next time around. I want to leave us with a quote from The Creative Process by James Baldwin. We know in the case of the person, I say human, the person who cannot tell himself the truth about his past is trapped in it, immobilized by the prison of his undiscovered self. So I'll let that marinate. And Amber, if there are any questions, we can open up the floor for Q&A. Thank you, guest speakers, for staying with us. And I do want to let everybody know that they have extended time here. And if you have any questions, you can also reach out to their LinkedIns. You can reach out to, you'll have their emails attached to the process or the slide deck. But yes, we have them here. If you have any questions, please ask.